Hello and welcome to this quick demonstration on how to make a detachable collar. A collar is a great way to completely transform a simple top or a dress. So something that exists in your wardrobe can be given a completely fresh look, and it's all about upcycling what we already have at our disposal. And in fact, the collar itself uses very little fabric to make. So you could use an old garment and cut it up and use it to create this beautiful collar for this tutorial. So the next step in this demonstration is to print off the pattern that is supplied with this tutorial. And it's very important that when you print this, you print it on an A4 sheet to actual size. That will give you the correct dimensions for your collar. Now, you may find after you've created your first collar that you may want to adjust the size in some way. Perhaps you'd like to make a collar for a child. All you need to do is to experiment with the existing pattern and reduce the size of it here if you want to create a smaller pattern, which I've done here, as you can see. That's just showing you what you can do and how you can be even more creative. So I'm just going to put our sample piece to the side and the pattern. And I'm going to show you the fabric I'm working with today. Now this fabric has a print, as you can see. So the printed side is the right side, which you'll hear me referring to during the course of the tutorial. That's the wrong side without the print. So you need to take your fabric and you need to fold it in half, like so. Once you have that done, you take your pattern and you place it on your fabric and you begin pinning it onto the fabric like this. Now you have to cut out the fabric based on the shape of the pattern. So just follow the contours of the pattern to get your shape using a good sharp fabric scissors. Now that's our second piece cut out, and it's very important to take your time with the cutting, because unless you get the cutting done correctly and accurately, it's going to mean that your two pieces are not going to be coordinated. They're not going to match up. So it's really important that you just take your time with your pattern and just cut right to the edge of it for both pieces, and that the two layers are exactly the same for each side of the collar. So now I'm just going to remove the pins from the fabric and the pattern, and as you can see, you now have your two pieces, your two layers. So each piece has two layers, and the next step in this process involves cutting our medium weight interfacing. So I'm just going to get that. So here's our interfacing, and I'm just going to put one of our pieces to the side here. Actually, put the two to the side, and again we just fold over our interfacing. We take our pattern piece and we just place it onto the interfacing and pin it in place. And then the next step is to cut out the two pieces of interfacing using our paper pattern. So now we have our two pieces of interfacing, and we just unpin our paper pattern from the interfacing. And now we can remove the pattern and just work with our interfacing here, okay? So each part of this collar is going to get the interfacing. So I'm just taking one side here. I'm going to unpin my two layers. The next step in the process will be to iron our interfacing down onto the wrong side of one of your collar pieces. So the shiny side is the sticky side when the heat is applied to it. So I'm just going to bring this to the iron now and iron it into place. Now, once you have that piece done, just make sure you get the coordinating piece for that. Here it is. Perfect. I'm just going to set those aside and repeat the process for the other part of the collar. There we go. I'm just placing the interfacing down on it. The shiny side of the interfacing is facing downwards. And then you take your iron and just gently glide the iron over the interfacing. Okay, so now that you have the interfacing ironed on to one side of the fabric, you now need to move on to the sewing machine. But before we do that, we're just going to place our two pieces down, right sides facing in like this. The right sides being the printed side in this example here. So now I have my sewing machine all set up to go. I've threaded it with the black thread to coordinate with my fabric. And as you can see, here is the piece that I attach the interfacing to, and there's its coordinating piece. So we need to place the right sides together, facing in towards each other. So I'm just going to do that before I move on to the sewing. So make sure they're edge to edge and matched up really well, and you can use a few pins to just hold everything in place to give complete accuracy so that nothing slips or moves during the sewing process. And what we're going to do now is we're going to sew all along this curve. So as you can see in this piece, we began our sewing on the outer curve about 2 inches down from the top. We worked our way down along the outer curve, along the side, and then up along the inner curve to the very top here. Now the next step in the process is to take your ribbon. Now I cut my ribbon to about 10 inches in length, but you can make yours longer if you prefer. So the next step is to take our ribbon and open up the narrow part of the collar at the top and just place your ribbon in against the seam and then fold it over like that. And just make sure there is a little bit of ribbon coming out over the edge. And then we're going to just pin that into place to secure everything. And once that is secure, then you have to take the rest of your ribbon and just place it through the opening, push it in through the opening. That's basically just to keep it out of the way while you're sewing. So just goes in there like that. And now we're just going to sew across the top here about 2 or 3 times, back stitching, just to secure everything in place and to make sure that that ribbon does not move. And now, as you can see, the ribbon has been secured into place, and the next step now is just to sew along this outer corner here about 1 centimetre down. And that will just help when we're going to turn this out, because we need to leave this part open to just turn the fabric the right side out. But first we want to just add a bit of extra security here, and it'll help with the turning just to sew about 1 centimetre down the outer corner here. And there you have it, just to show where the extra bit of sewing was done there. So now what we have to do is we have to cut our fabric in the corners here just before we turn it out. Just cut the corners at an angle like that. It'll just help the collar piece to sit better. So we do that on all our corners. And then on the outer curve, we're going to cut a series of notches. And I think for this, it's important to use a good sharp scissors. That one I was using is paper scissors, so it's not really going to do me much good. But with the good sharp scissors like this, you'll be able to just create your series of notches along the outer curve like that, as you can see. So I'm just going to continue along the outer curve to do that. So now I've created my series of notches along the outer curve, and now I'm going to turn it over here and I'm going to cut into the inner curve. Now take quite good care here that you don't cut right into your stitches. You don't want to do that. You're just going to place at regular intervals little nips with your scissors into the inner curve, and what we're doing here is we're just going to help the fabric to sit nicely when it's turned out, which really helps when you've got a curve like this in your fabric. So we need to start turning this now. Now this part is a little tricky, so just take your time. It is a tight space to try and squeeze all that fabric through, but it will go through eventually. I thought I was going to have to fast forward through this bit because sometimes it is fiddly and more time consuming, but it went through quite easily for me there. So now, as you can see, I have it turned out, but we're losing our corners here. Now, to help with that process, we can just use a blunt pen, or I'm going to actually just take this crochet hook and just press it along. I'm just placing it inside the collar like this, as you can see, and I'm just using it to press out my seams. And take care with your corners. Just spend a bit of time making sure to tease those corners out, because that's a really nice part of the collar. It gives it its shape, and we just want to make sure that those corners are pressed out like that, and then move along the inside curve as well, just making sure to press out those seams. And that is one side of our collar. So I'm going to take our other collar piece, and I still have to cut the corners off at an angle, 45-degree angle like that. And again, I'm repeating the process along the outer curve. So just you can ignore the gap and just work down the rest of the side of the outer curve. So I've done that side, as you can see. And I'm just going to turn it around now and do the little cuts, taking care not to cut into my stitches. Now, so I have that turned out as well. And like the other piece, we need to get that definition back into the shape. So I'm just going to take a crochet hook. You can take something sharp like a pen, and just work it into your corners like this, making sure you get that nice defined edge, nice defined shape that we had with our pattern. So I'm just manipulating that crochet hook along the sides as well, the inner curve and the outer curve. And that's how it's looking so far. Now we're going to take the iron next, and we're just going to press that down to give it more definition before we start working on the opening here. So what we want to do here is you can see that the ribbon is coming out. So just turn that top bit inside like that. We want to hide these open seams. So what we want to do is turn them in with our hands like that. And once you have that in place, just take a pin to secure everything before we move on to the sewing machine and sew that closed. So I'm just going to give those collar pieces a little press out. So I'm just setting up here on my desk and placing down one of these on my tea towel, and then just gently rubbing the iron, gliding the iron over this piece just to flatten it out and give it some more definition. Now, as I said, we need to work on this opening here in our next step. So we just need to tuck in that nice and neat, and then just turn those seams in to match up with the rest of the sewing. So we just need to make sure that all goes into place like that. Okay, so to help put everything, or to help hold everything into place before we move on to the sewing machine again, I'm just going to take my iron and I'm just going to gently glide it and press it along the top of the collar piece like that, and that will just help to define the crease, so that you have got something to work with in the sewing machine. Okay, that you can actually, that'll just help you with the sewing. So yeah, that's all matched up nicely. I'm happy with that. So I'm just going to set that piece aside and do the same for this. So again, just firstly press everything gently, and this will also give you the opportunity to see if you turned it out correctly and that all the seams are pressed out and that your corners are pressed out, which they are in this case. Sometimes it's easy to forget a step in the process. So again, we have to repeat what we just did there. We just need to turn in our opening and make sure it all matches up nice and neat with our existing seam, and just place that down and give it a little press with the iron. So that's our two pieces ready now, and I'm going to set up the sewing machine and get started. So here's our two pieces that we've just completed on the machine, and I'm just going to trim off any excess threads that I can see, just to tidy it up. What we need to do now is just to join the two pieces together, and we're just going to use a very simple whip stitch to do that. And we're just going to do a few tiny little stitches here just to attach the two pieces together. So there you have it, there's your collar made. And this is just a great addition to a very simple top or dress to give it a completely different look. And you can have really good fun with these colours. You can embellish them in so many ways. I'm just going to show you some examples of what you could do. So I showed you this one earlier on. This is just in the houndstooth pattern, and what I did was I just cut out little pieces of black lace, placed them on, and then sewed little pearls inside these little flowers, just to create something really unique and special. I've also created another one here. Now, I haven't attached this in the center, but I'm just going to show it to you to give you some ideas of what you could do. So this is a piece I made out of that kind of wet look fabric that's very popular, and I have lots of different types of trims that I use for different types of projects. So I cut 2 pieces of that out, and you know, you could just have fun deciding, you know, where you would like to place these on your collar. You could even just put one there and sew that into the center like that. You know, you could turn them this way. That could be really pretty. There's some other examples here of plique, if I can find them. So have some fun experimenting with different types of trims. That's actually quite pretty. Do I have anything else? You could also use bits of broken jewelry. So I mean, this is just something that came off an old necklace, and just something as simple as that. I mean, I also have this lace here, which, you know, you could cut out a piece of lace, which I did earlier, and then just place that down like that. Let's see, maybe that way would be better. But it just gives you an idea of what you can do. Just cut another piece that matches for the other side. It would look really, really special. I also have another one here I can show you that's actually finished. So as you can see with this piece, again, I used the wet look fabric. I'm a huge fan of it. And then I just cut out some leather flowers from some existing trim I had, and I just sewed them into place, and that creates something really high-end looking and really special, and will completely transform a very simple cheap top into something pretty high-end looking. So that's a really nice idea there, and it's all about upcycling and recycling and being sustainable. Working with what you have is just so important. Just look at your wardrobe with fresh eyes and see, have you any garments that you can work with, that you can improve on? And even sometimes, you know, we often have old garments that we are hesitant to throw away, perhaps because we like the fabric, and you know, you could just reuse that fabric to create something like this. You know, collars don't actually use a lot of fabric, so you don't need too much, but as you can see, that's very pretty there, isn't it? So I'm just going to wish you all the best now, because we've come to the end of our demonstration, and I hope you have great fun getting creative, and I'd love to see examples of your work if that's possible, but if not, have great fun creating, and the best of luck.